Welcome to MacroMicroCosm Literary Review, home of the quarterly print and digital MacroMicroCosm Literary and Arts Journal. Our current issue is Healing Hands, and it's available on MagCloud, Magster, and the Vreda store. Today, we have a fantastic author to interview, courtesy of R&R Book Tours, author and rescue dog guy, BK Greenwood. BK Greenwood lives in Austin, Texas, with his wife and wolf pack of 4 rescue dogs. He loves to travel and has incorporated his experiences into his writing. BK enjoys works of fiction and nonfiction, with a heavy emphasis on history, adventure, and classics. His passion for history is on display in his debut novel, The Last Roman, Exile. Thank you for coming, BK. We're so excited to have you. It's going to be a lot of fun, everybody. My name is Sapha Burnell. I am the author of 3 books and editor of many, and I'm here today to have a chat with a fellow author. So this is a pretty good day. There's coffee, there's puppies, there's Romans. We cannot go wrong. Now, about The Last Roman. What if the Gladiator smashed into the Highlander and then careened into John Wick? You would get The Last Roman, Exile. Some debts you cannot repay, even if you live forever. Seasoned imperial officer Marcus Sempronius Groscius leads the 9th Roman legion into a bloody battle against a fierce barbarian tribe. It's a battle he won't survive. When he awakens 3 days later, clawing his way from a shallow grave, Marcus must face the reality of his new existence. He will never see the afterlife. But that won't stop him from dying time and again over the next 2,000 years. But Marcus is not the only one cursed with eternal life, and they are determined to bring the world crashing to its knees. Forced to confront the only brother he's ever known, can Marcus prevent the inevitable and find redemption? Follow the story of a man who should be dead as he tries to save the world and his soul.
All right. Well, thanks for that intro. I think I'm going to get you to read that blurb for me on a number of different occasions. That's the best version I've heard of that so far. I appreciate the intro into the book, and hopefully people that have an affinity towards historical fiction or modern thrillers would be interested in reading it. It kind of is a hybrid of both those genres. So the book is really a modern thriller that kind of runs through not only book 1, but book 2 and 3 in the trilogy. But about every other chapter, we try to do a flashback to different parts of history to fill in some character development and give a little bit of motivation for what's going on in the modern day. So that's kind of a snapshot of what the whole series is about.
I love it. So you had me at The Gladiator, and then you had me again at John Wick. Because the Gladiator extended cuts, like the actual director's cut of The Gladiator, is my favorite movie of all time. So obviously when I saw this blurb, I was like, Romans, and John Wick. So we've got incredible action, somebody with a good spine, and we've got this kind of Romanesque feel to it. How did you come to mashing them all together? How did you come to that kind of inspiration?
That's an interesting question, and I probably need to spend a little bit more time trying to remember. An interesting story is I started this about 23 years ago, the book itself, and it's been in formation and edits and re-edits for the last 20 plus years. So the actual, genesis of the idea it's hard for me to remember where, but I think I was heavily influenced by the movie Highlander, which I thought was really cool because you have a character who, you have scenes where you go back and you're in the Revolutionary period or you're old Scottish medieval periods, and then you've got a guy walking around in modern day with a sword, which is, who could beat that? So I think I was heavily influenced there. And I always liked history, so I wanted to incorporate history somehow into it. And so I came across the idea, and I know there's another series called Casca that was written in the 70s. It's based on an immortal Roman soldier. And we have a little bit of the genesis there, kind of like you would if, Dracula is the first vampire. We have a ton of vampire books, obviously. Mm-hmm. So that's a very similar premise, but where we go from there is a lot different. I have multiple immortals in my book that kind of battle each other throughout the history. And we have a pretty good protagonist-antagonist relationship between the Roman, and the actual antagonist is actually a disciple, one of the Doubting Thomas. He's actually the antagonist in the book. So they battle each other throughout history, and mostly in the modern day, is where their conflict it plays out. So,
All right. So we've got Doubting Thomas in here too.
yeah,
Okay. This is going to be very interesting. You know, as somebody who, my spouse's family is Orthodox, I myself was raised in the Christian church. It's going to be interesting to read a book where you have this biblical figure who's actually a bad guy. Which, I mean, depending on how
yeah,
you interpret the Bible, you could view a lot of things like that. But, you know,
yes,
it'll
yeah,
be,
and it's not, yeah, yeah, it's not like he's just a bad guy right out of the gate. I mean, there's an event that happens up in the book that kind of sours him, is probably the best way to put it, towards what his normal faith would be. And so he kind of, like anybody, like any normal person, can have mistakes and can go down the wrong path. And that's what we kind of explore here. And actually, as we've gone through the reviews and the feedback from the readers, Thomas is actually their favorite character in the series. They actually really associate with him, and they really kind of understand his conflict that he has as he moves through the different periods of time. And so him and Marcus is kind of the grunt that carries the story forward, because it's all based on the last Roman, but people seem to really connect with Thomas. So,
all right, that's awesome. And, it's a good thing too, to recognize that when we write about something, like I write about a mythology a lot in my Judge of Mystic series. So, speaking from the experience of somebody who's doing work in a similar vein in a lot of ways, we always have to make sure people recognize that we are separating whatever religious belief there is or was in something with the story that we are creating with that idea. And so
yes.
that wonderful fictional separation is such a wonderful thing. And then we can explore these things, which maybe in a religious context may or may not be taboo, but we can
Yeah.
explore it and have fun with it and actually engage with this in a completely different way, in a way that we have so much freedom. So kudos to that. I cannot wait to see what Thomas is like. And I hope everybody else wants to see it too.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I agree with you there as we go forward. In the idea, religion isn't a major portion of my story. It's actually kind of the backdrop at which the rest of the story happens. It's how the characters become immortal, and it's kind of there as like I said, there's almost the environment around it, but we don't focus on religion. I have had probably my first 1-star review was somebody that was upset that I didn't use the Bible. I didn't interpret the Bible correctly, which is, yeah, you obviously don't respond to those, but it's an act of fiction. So if you need to tweak something to kind of meet what you need to do for your story, that's kind of what fiction is all about. If I was writing a documentary, then everything's fair there at telling me that I'm not interpreting things correctly. So yeah, it can be an interesting road. We were a little concerned when we went down this topic, but I think so far it's worked out well.
Yes, that's what I like to hear. Now, what do you want readers to feel at the end of The Last Roman? What message do you want the readers to take with them?
I think at the end of the series, I want them to have enjoyed the ride. The one thing I make very clear is that I write to entertain. I'm not. There may be some life stories or some life learnings that I try to instill along the way, but I'm not writing the next great American novel or trying to really address a public issue or something of that nature. I want to entertain. I want people to be able to pick up my book and get a cup of coffee and sit down on a chair and let a couple hours just fade away and go into a different place. So if at the end of the series they're happy with the time they spent, they're looking forward to maybe some prequels or some short stories that I have associated with it and finding out what happens to the characters, over those 2,000 years, then that to me is where I'm successful. I want to take people away from the modern day and just kind of let them enjoy a tale, spin a yarn, I guess is the best way to put it.
Excellent. I love it. We need entertainment. We need it desperately. Give us the entertainment of The Last Roman. It's gonna be fun. So this one, it's obviously ebook, paperback, hardcover. I was looking, do you have an audiobook for it as well? Or is that something?
There's an actual audiobook available through Audible. Book 1 was released in early January, and book 2 will be out on 2/22/22, so February 22nd of this year. Book 3, we don't have the actual book itself, and ebook and paperback doesn't come out till the end of March. So I would expect the audiobook to be May timeframe would be my guess.
Okay, so these are coming out fairly quickly. There's no waiting 8 years for the next edition of The Last Roman. You're just getting it in there.
Yeah, what happened is I spent that 23 years getting book 1 done, and I was like, if I do it at this pace, I'm going to be really old when I get the series done. So book 2 was mostly finished over those 20 years, so that one's able to come out pretty quick. And then I really felt like, as a new author, I wanted to establish and have a decent backlog of books. So I wanted to get the series finished and have that out there, and then I can take my time with either an anthology of short stories or a full prequel, and I can take a little bit more time to get that done. But I think it's important you get at least 2 or 3 books into your backlog so that your readers have something else to dig into while you're trying to figure out either your next series or whatever it is you're going to write next. So
smart. So if you had to describe The Last Roman in 3 words, what would they be?
3 words. Action pack thriller probably is probably the best way to do it. So it's using very standard words in that are out there, but to me that's what everyone or fast-paced thriller as well is probably another good one. Everyone talks about it, moves along very quickly like a Netflix series, very scene-oriented and has a good pace to it. So
good. Okay. Who is your favorite character to write now? I'm assuming we almost answered this already, but for posterity, who is your favorite character to write?
Yeah. Thomas was interesting, and I do have a lot of fun with him, but there's almost a sidekick character. Her name is Sam, and she works with Marcus in the modern day. And I really enjoy writing her because she's really sassy and kind of a smart ass. She's very techie, very kind of independent, bold young lady. And I, in parts of it, I modeled after my daughter and some of the conversations that we have with one another. And so you can definitely see her coming through in that character. So that was one of my funner ones to write. So
that would be amazingly fun. That'd be so fun. Now, does writing energize or exhaust you?
It's a great question. I think depending on the mood I'm in, if I'm in a writing mood, when I get done, I'm pretty energized and I feel like I had a great session. If I'm coming up on a deadline and I'm trying to finish something out and I'm really pushing, it's exhausting. I don't know if you ever heard the Nano November writing thing where you try to write so many words in a month. So that one was 50,000 words in November. I did about 4 days of that, and I found it to be not only exhausting, but it was almost depressing. I felt like I was just having to write for the sake of writing, which I guess is what it is, but I'm a really efficient. I don't throw a lot of stuff away. So I felt myself just writing stuff that was useless to me. So I'd rather, if I'm only going to write, if I only get the feeling twice a week, I'd rather, if I'm going to be really productive during those 2 sessions, then that works for me. Some people like to write every day and have to be, the voracious writers, and then they only take 10% of what they view. That's a great style for them, but not for me. So I usually come away, I think, exhilarated and happy with what I got down on paper or theoretical paper. So I'm a list guy. So if I get stuck, I kind of list out what it is that I need to get accomplished in the series or in the book or in the chapter. And that kind of, then I can kind of, cross them out and say, okay, I did this, and then I got this across and so forth. So I'm a list guy. That's probably comes from my analytical background. So
nice. What are some common traps for aspiring writers?
I think I almost just kind of mentioned it where, there's things that people tell you, I took some of the master classes you see in the masterclass thing, or you go to book groups and so forth, and people say, oh, you got to write every day. Or, hey, you got to read voraciously. You got to keep reading while you're writing, or don't edit while you write, or all those different things. And what I say is, whatever works for you is what you need to do. Don't fall into somebody else's trap of what they say you need to do. If they say, oh, you have to write for 2 hours every day, that's just what works for them. So you need to find what works for you as a new writer, and it may change over time, right? You may not write every day, and then but by the time if it becomes a full-time career, you may find yourself writing every day or doing research, or some people say don't read reviews, and some people say, oh well, all those things. Whatever people say you have to do, to me, is immediately I kind of challenge it. I kind of go, there is no hard fast rules when it comes to this. Is an art, and when you do an art form, that by definition in my mind doesn't have rules. So if it makes you happy and you're creative and you're able to express yourself, then that's what you should do, not what someone else tells you.
Solid advice. Except if you're part of my workshop streams and I tell you to do something. Just kidding. Just kidding.
Well, if you sign up for something like that, then that to me, that makes sense. Like when I signed up for that nano thing, then I officially dropped it. I went on social media and said, I'm out.
I did nano successfully twice over the 10 years has been nano, and unsuccessfully every single other time. There's only been twice that I've been able to do it, and it almost killed me. I was up till 3:00 in the morning because, of course, life continues on. It's not like back in our late teens, early 20s, maybe you're at university, you can kind of figure out the amount of hours it would take to get. And back in the day, it was 100,000 words in 1 month.
Ugh,
and, and yes, I unironically said back in the day, I've reached that part of life, but you have to have planned for it so far in advance to make sure that your bills are paid, the mortgage is paid, all of this is done.
No vacations.
Time. All those obligations that you normally have, tank them. It's nano. It's kudos to the people who can do it and make it work. And
I mean, 100,000 words would be. I mean, that's 3,300 words a day. I mean, to me, I write these short stories that I use as reader magnets, and kind of eventually I do an anthology, and they're about 5,000 words. I mean, that would be putting out a short story every 2 days or 1 or 2 days. It's just unfathomable to me that's the case. But hey, kudos for you for finishing it twice. That's amazing. I got to about 14,000 words, and I was like, I'm done.
Yeah. Oh man. No, out of the many attempts, it's only been 2 successes. Oh man. So
I got enough guilt in my life. I don't need the guilt of not keeping up with nano, right?
Sometimes these things, I think a lot of these writing competitions and things, they're meant to kind of inspire people to sit down and write, get the words on the page. How many times have you heard somebody be like, well, I've got this idea, but I just don't know really what to do with it. Sit down and write. Just write it down.
Yeah, exactly.
It doesn't matter if the first draft sucks. Sit down and write it. The process of sitting down and writing will help you with it. And some people need that. Other people need to know that they're 500 words a day, or 1,000 words every couple of days, or whatever it is that really thoughtful, kind of pondered and fully claimed sort of fiction. It's again going back to that ideal of style, and going back to the idea of the art, and how art is, well, one, so subjective in interpretation, but it's also so subjective in how you create it. There are guidelines, but those guidelines don't have to be hard and fast rules, at least not anymore.
For sure.
Art history and moving on. Do you want each book to stand on its own, or are you trying to build a body of work with connections between each book?
Yeah, the 3 at least I've done here are definitely connected. I wouldn't say cliffhangers, but they're very similar to where you would get at the end of Star Wars and The Empire Strikes Back, right? Where you have kind of a conclusion to the book, but you definitely don't have an end to the story. So the 3 that I've written so far, Exile and Abyss, which are out, and then Absolution, which will come out in March, those are definitely meant to be read as a series. So you can't pick up. I had one reviewer who did pick up book 2 and read it and said, "Wow, this didn't make a lot of sense." And I'm like, okay, so it is meant along that vein. The prequels that I do will not be requiring that, and I that's the main reason I want to do those, because I want to spend an entire period around one point in history, and I want it to be a standalone story. So there'll probably be an intro that kind of gives you the background as to why you have immortal characters, and then that will be pretty similar across all the prequels, and then it'll just jump into whatever period of time I decided to write about at that point. I try to pick something that usually most people don't know about, that's something that's easy for them to learn from the background of it.
So when you're talking about picking a period of time that people are, not necessarily well versed in, I'm guessing they're not suddenly in Rococo France during the reign of the Sun King in the middle of Versailles, but instead it would be somewhere different in that time period or something like that, somewhere outside of that sort of normal historical fiction kind of vein.
Yeah, like if you think about it, we get we get a ton of stuff about like the Civil War. We started to pick up some things about the Revolution, like the Revolutionary War. World War II is obviously way overdone. World War One in the last couple of years has really picked up speed. You know, people been a lot of movies and things about that. When I talk about it, I would say, you know, and people know about the Napoleonic times, but a lot of people don't know about, say, the Golden Horde, right? You know, of Genghis Khan, right? Not a lot of stuff written about that, but that was an amazing. He created one of the largest empires the world's ever seen, and we really don't talk about it. Not only because it's just it's mostly because I think because it's not in our Western culture. It's more of an Eastern culture thing that spilled over into our culture because he invaded Eastern Europe a lot.
Yeah, I thought he went all the way to
But
the
it's just
Danube. But
yeah, he made it all the way to them. He conquered most of Eastern Europe, but we don't really talk about it. And when we do, we talk about him as the bad guy. He was just barbarian, and they came in and did terrible things. Well, it's all written by who writes the history, right? So to me, picking something like that and really kind of exploring it in the full book is with characters that people already know, which is nice because then you can actually focus a little bit more on the story itself, and people are already familiar with those characters. And it's almost like a friend is taking you through the story that somebody you've already had an association with.
Yeah, I like it. I like it. How did publishing your first book change your process?
Marketing once I published the first book, then marketing took on a third to 50% of my effort that I put into the writing process, right? Because it can consume you overwhelmingly just with email newsletter lists and podcasts you do and interviews and whatever it is, ads you were trying to do and tweaking ads and then retweaking stale ads and then all the things you want to do there and making sure your blurb is correct and your landing page and your website and all those things that are not books. There's not writing. And normally if you did a traditional house, nowadays it's getting a little bit less where they support you on all those things. They expect you to do a bunch of marketing and stuff on your own and having your social media presence done, but they will manage things like websites. They manage things like, getting you into a Barnes and Noble right now. I'm in 6 local Barnes and Nobles here in Austin, but it's because I drive around and I bug the manager and show my book and say, hey, you should buy this. I'll sign it and, put it up front, and then going there 2 weeks later and kind of pulling it off the shelf and turning it front so that the face is out and stuff like that. So, doing things that, little tiny things that just you wouldn't know would burn up your time. And then your website breaks or whatever it is. So that to me is what happened after publishing book 1. It became from writing a book to now managing almost a franchise, like a company, a small company that you have, and you have to do all those things yourself. So that was the biggest difference to me after publishing book 1.
Yeah, and it's something to keep in mind that even in the traditional published worlds, authors still have to push their own book. There's only so much money that a publisher has to give towards promotion of a book, which then, when's their next release? When's the next book going in? All this kind of thing. You have to think of, how that goes. And it's something I remember being in a Writers Union of Canada meeting, and there's these authors, some of whom were quite substantial authors in Canada and internationally, quite well known. And even them with, incredible contracts and these amazing things and their agent and their publicist and everything else going around them. They're like, oh man, are you kidding me? I remember the days back in the 70s when publishers used to, give a lot more money for promotion and things like that. But now it's even for them, it was a situation of, well, time to roll up your sleeves. Let's go. You want to be an author? You also have to be a marketer, or you have to have one heck of a promoter.
Exactly. And or all the above. Yeah. And the money to do that. Right. So you can outsource any of that you want to outsource, but you have to figure out if there's the return on investment when you do that. Right. And if you spend $500 on ads, are you going to get $500 in royalties? You don't know, right? So it's scaling a lot of that stuff too. Like a lot of people, Facebook is great because you can do $5 ads, right? You can do this $5 a day, and then you could be, wow, I'm making $10 a day on that, and then you double it, and all of a sudden you're losing money, right? So it's incredibly finicky, and it's a tough market, and there's a lot of data and analytics that, quite honestly, I'm not good at. But it's an exciting and to me it's great because I control my own destiny. I don't have to wait for a publisher to, I may want to launch my book next month and they may say, no, you're going to be slated for June of 2023. And that's just the way it is. So I get to control that part of it, which I really like.
Mm-hmm. I just want to say a quick thank you to my publisher for letting me do this interview. Love you. Neon leaving anybody?
Yep.
It's all in good fun, but it's a good argument to have, and it's a good situation to kind of be honest about, and especially for authors that are like watching this podcast. And there's quite a few writers who watch this podcast who are in the middle of shipping their first manuscript. They're in the middle of kind of finding a place for it to go and that kind of thing, to recognize, you know, where that balance is and what in ourselves we need to know what we're capable of, you know. So if you think that you're capable of doing this marketing and this and that and the whole thing, go for it. But if not, then either you're going to be going a traditional route and hoping that your publisher actually comes through with a lot of that kind of thing, or you're going to be saving up the nickels and dimes, possibly quarters, throw a shilling in there every once in a while, but you know, you get there eventually. And what inspired you to write?
You know, I didn't write when I was younger. It was in my 20s where I really started to. I wasn't ever a journaler, and I didn't write short stories. I literally, and this is kind of interesting because a lot of people say, hey, kick off with short stories and kind of move your way up. I literally started with this book that I published last May. That was my first thing I sat down and wrote. And I'm not sure if the writing wasn't the thing. Like, I'm not, a lot of people get a lot of joy out of the actual writing part of it, and I don't dislike it. I enjoy to write. It was more the storytelling for me. I'd read a lot when I was a kid. We moved around a lot of different schools when I was young, and so I would go to libraries instead of meeting friends and just check out books, because you know, you open a book and it's your new best friend, right? It takes you away to somewhere else in some other period of time, and it doesn't, you know, reject you and call you names or whatever. It's great. So I read all the time, and I just did that all the way through my teens and into my early 20s. And at some point, kind of the switch kind of flipped, and I was like, okay, now I'm ready to tell my own story after reading a bunch of these stories. And I started putting, you know, pen to paper, you know, fingers to keyboard, whatever it was at the time. And I started this story, and it's kind of interesting because I know a lot of people that have tons of notebooks full of like short stories or journaling and all that thing, and that's how they got into writing. For me, it was almost a direct path straight to my book, and so that's kind of how it worked. And then it spent the next 20 years getting rewritten 30 or 40 times before friends and family finally said, "This is just like a kid. You got to push it out of the house at some point, get it out of its own."
Yeah. Yeah. And there's never that point where you look at your novel and go, wow, it's so finished. I don't have to. No, you know, we're doing the audiobook recording of Neon Lieben right now. And that's my cyberpunk novel. And I'm going through this. And of course, I'm doing the narration myself because I'm a bit of a performer, you might say. But so many times me stopping and being like, oh, where's a pen? You know, I think I could make this.
Yeah, you want to re-edit. Yes.
I could just one more thing. And poor Tegan was sitting here the other day and we were going through it. I'm like, oh yeah, you know, we're preparing for, I think it was a convention that I'll be doing in the summer. And I was like, oh man, I think we should read this part. I should read this. Oh, wait a minute. Oh, I could reorder that sentence. And she looked at me, picked up a book and smacked me over the head with it. She was like, stop it. You're done. All in good fun, you know, all in good fun. Tegan and I have known each other for years. We've gone beyond the editor-author relationship into just being friends. There's never a time, I think, when we think that it's done, and we just have to let it go the way it is, even if it doesn't know how to tie its own shoes.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, and there's a difference between someone, you know, emails you and says, hey, on page, 273, there's a typo, or, you know, I did the terrible thing of, I had corn in one of my stories, that corn hadn't been found yet. It was still in the new world, right? And that's the great thing with Amazon nowadays, is you go in, you do 10 seconds worth of a dusting, you upload the new manuscript, and then anybody who buys an ebook from there forward, or even the paperback, gets the fixed version. That's a different, but yeah, going back and saying, hey, this paragraph could be much better tweaked if I did it another way. You could spend the rest of your life doing that. And I did spend 23 years doing that, by the way. And at some point, it just, you have to say, this is, I don't want to say good enough because it sounds terrible, but it's good enough to be entertaining and for what it's meant to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and for the inevitable person who goes, there was no corn in the old world before, well, actually, the use of the word corn is a fairly ancient word in Europe, and it meant any kind of grain. So
There
technically,
you
they did have
go.
corn. They called things like
Sure,
wheat
that's
or
a great
barley
point.
corn, especially in
I didn't
England
know that, so
in
that's good.
the
Yeah.
the medieval going into the Renaissance. So
Oh, I should. It was my brother-in-law who pointed that out, so I should go talk to him about that and say, hey, technically,
depending on what era that scene was in, if it was in the medieval or
yeah,
going into the Renaissance, then they had the word corn. It just meant grain.
yeah,
All right.
exactly. That's what I
So,
changed it to, by the way. I changed it to
yeah,
grain,
it,
which is probably not right.
well, it's probably,
So
yeah, it's
probably either
fine.
one, right?
It
Yeah,
works.
exactly.
Oh, English language. Let me tell you.
Yeah,
Okay, what's your
fun stuff.
favorite underappreciated novel?
I was thinking about this the other day, and there's a lot of novels that they get that I think, because to me, War and Peace, right? War and Peace is considered a classic, but I think a lot of people get forced to read it, from like a perspective of like they're in college or even high school. Sometimes forces people to read it, and it's really difficult to get into at the beginning because there's so many names, so many characters, and then the Russians love to have three names for everybody. He switches up the names, so it takes you three times as long. But to me, it's just a great tale over. It's almost like a pre-Gone with the Wind type of story. It's actually a Russian version of Gone with the Wind, right? It's all these tales of people having riches and getting bad things happening to them, and it follows a story arc of so many different characters and keeps it all kind of tight along the way. I think War and Peace, even though, like I said, it is a classic, so saying it's underappreciated is probably a little bit of a misnomer. But to me, that's one where I would say I still enjoy it a lot, and I would recommend a lot of people who like a good story to pick that up and give it a chance. Gonna take a couple hundred pages, but give it a chance. So
Yeah, I think there are some books where people assume that they're classics because they've stood the test of time, and other ones they're classics because they're good. Reading the classics is not a bad thing. Maybe sometimes we'll find a classic where we're like, wow, that was definitely of its time.
yeah,
You know,
yeah, they don't stand up well, do they?
yeah, there's some of them you're like, huh, okay, so we're gonna have to have a discussion about that one. But there's other books that are just they just work. It's good to remind ourselves about that kind of thing. I mean, Tolstoy is just many hearts indeed. Now, how do you balance making demands on the reader with taking care of them?
That's an interesting thought, and I think it's become even more important as I get into book three and I'm finishing up the trilogy, because I don't have any more places to make any course corrections here, right? If I wanted to make some adjustments in book two and take it somewhere else, I had that ability in book two and three to do that. Book three is the end, right? So I kind of have to go to the end, and I have to balance between what I think is the appropriate arc for the story and how the readers will react to that, right? I mean, obviously, I don't want to have a Game of Thrones situation where I have the revolts from readers who are not happy with the way it ends. But I also can't just try to build a Hollywood ending just because I want to satisfy readers, right? So it's a healthy balance in there. You want readers to be comfortable and kind of have almost like a feeling of completeness when they finish the book, but they might not. You should probably also have them a little bit on edge, and a little bit emotional, a little bit, maybe upset that maybe some of the characters did or didn't make it through to the end, and maybe it didn't end exactly how they thought it was going to end. Maybe throw a little twists and stuff in there. But to me, it's a respect for the reader. It's like, by picking up my book, they're willing to go to places that they might not have thought they wanted to go. So that's my job, is to kind of take them a little bit outside their comfort zone, but not so much that they put the book down halfway through and they say, okay, everything was going fine. And then unicorns showed up out of nowhere. And I don't know why no unicorns are in this book, or werewolves showed up out of nowhere. Right. So you can't, you gotta have that healthy balance there. Not that I wouldn't mind unicorns showing up in the book. That would be awesome.
I mean, they are in tapestries, so they'd be
Yeah,
historically
exactly.
appropriate.
Yeah,
I think.
if you have a flashback in Scotland, maybe they'd be great there. So
Oh yeah, I think so. I think that would be fun. I think you coined it perfectly, I think, when you said respect of the reader. And I think there's a lot of books that are coming out, some of them which forget sometimes that really the reader is trusting you on this journey, and you need to take them to places where you have to decide what those places are and what you want to put that reader through, and I think it's an incredibly dear thing to make sure that we define our books based on whether or not we want them to be that entertaining, I'm going to take you through it, but it's going to be all right in the end, or it's going to be kind of all right in the end, or, well, at least Frodo didn't die,
Yeah.
or if you want to be like, no, I'm trying to educate them, I'm trying to get them to understand something or feel ire or feel a pain or feel sadness. It goes back to that idea of what do you want the readers to feel by the end of your book. And I think you coined it perfectly with the respect of bringing them along a journey, but helping them feel that kind of thriller all the way to the end. So what does literary success look like to you?
That's an interesting point, and I've seen that a lot of discussion about that in writers groups and so forth, right? And there's always the artist response, which is, I just want my work to be published and be out there and be accepted by the community, which is kind of not really an answer, right? For me, I think I'm positioning this to be a post real world job type of job, so a second career, which means by the terminology career means it needs to be profitable, right? It needs to be the first benchmark for a writer is that you are making money, like literally you're spending less on ads and things than you are bringing in royalties. That's a major benchmark in my opinion. Not even counting the cost of covers and editors, right? That's another level of, okay, now you got to recoup money that you've invested there. And then the third phase is you're able to actually pay for all your advertising, your marketing, publicity, whatever that is. You actually pay for your editing and covers, and now you're making money beyond that, right? I mean, so there's different levels from the financial standpoint. Success otherwise can be, being recognized as a author, as a real author, right? Not just someone who self-published and sold 15 copies, which is great, but that's to me, to become a career and have aspirations for being a career, you have to be recognized by other authors, respected by other authors. And then most importantly, you have to have a fan base that is excited about new material that you're putting out there. And to me, that's probably the biggest thing that I would strive for, is to have a fan base that emails me once in a while and says, hey, when are you going to put out the next book? Unless if I'm doing a terrible job of my newsletters, then that would be a good question. Or, hey, I had somebody post a review on a short story that they said, hey, I'm halfway through book 2 and I stopped and read this short story. And I love that you can use these short stories to build character development. Little things like that from people you don't know, whether they're in the UK or whatever, are organically giving you feedback, starts to reaffirm yourself as a writer and an author. And that to me is one of those major milestones you move towards as being successful.
Agreed.
Probably put a lot of stuff in there.
Hey, no, that's good. I mean, there is the discussion that there is a difference between being a writer and an author. If you want to be a writer and you don't care about, commercial success, you just want your work to be out there, great. There's nothing wrong with that. Go for it. There are plenty of platforms where you can put your writing up and people can adore it, and you can get that kind of thing going. Being an author entails that this is something which can be marketed and bought and sold. That's part of what being the profession of an author is, instead of the hobbyist of being a writer. And again, there's nothing wrong with being a writer. Being a writer is amazing. I know some of the best writing I've ever seen, some of the best stories I've ever seen were some friends of mine who write exclusively on a role-playing storyboard. It's some of the best writing I've ever seen. It's free. Yeah. Anybody can read it. Anybody can be like, oh my gosh, I want to like that post. And that is how they choose to express their medium. That is how they choose to express themselves. But then if you want something to be in book form, to be something like people see in stores, things like that, there is a more commercial side to it that needs to be relevant. Going along with that too, The idea of getting reviews for your book from people you don't know, not just, the friend and family reviews. Yeah, so my brother wrote this book and it's really good. I think it's about unicorns. Roman soldiers. Roman soldiers. Oh,
That might ride
great.
unicorns.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And that's what I was talking about. I love seeing reviews. I seem to have a decent amount of my sales are in the UK. I think they like historical fiction in the UK, so I seem to have a decent amount of sales there. And so, and I also consider the Brits to be very pragmatic about their viewpoints and their feedback. It seems that they're the ones I'll get pretty good, honest feedback and say, hey, it's a great story, but you got to suspend animation here or suspend your imagination here and there and so forth. So I love seeing that. And the same thing, I've done some farmer markets around here, which is just a way of getting the books in front of people. And I'm starting now to have return people that have bought book one that come back and buy book two. And then they're like, this is just really good, and say, hey, thanks. I appreciate that, and getting that, like you said, the affirmation from non-family and friends, which is the first level of family and friends, is they don't even want to, you give it, they're worried that it's going to be terrible. They don't know how to tell you it's going to be terrible, right? So that's the first worry. And then when they do kind of read, they go, okay, it's not bad. So they're kind of on board. But even they get a little bit surprised when you go and you have hundreds of reviews from people that you don't know. And then they're kind of like, well, wait, maybe this is something that's picking up speed and going along, right? And then it actually is kind of a epiphany for everybody involved in the process, right? It's like, this is now we've kind of moved into a different sphere, like you said, from just a writer, and I hate to use the term just, but a writer who's just expressed himself to trying to be successful from a commercial and literary standpoint. And that's cool. It's fun. And, who knows how long it lasts or if it even does last, but it's still fun to be in that moment and to enjoy it as it goes along.
Yeah. Do you view writing as a kind of spiritual practice?
I don't know if it's spiritual is probably I think if spiritual, if we in a non-religious way, I think to me it's a way of calming. It's a way of me grounding myself a little bit with the everyday challenges that we have, like you said, the paying the bills and worrying about we got to redo the plumbing in the house or yard work or whatever that is. It's a way of just going in and kind of zenning out for a little bit and just being able to sit down and reground yourself and explore yourself and where you want to take a story and where you want to take the characters in the story and being comfortable with that. So to me, it kind of gives that grounding aspect of it.
If you didn't write, what would you do?
That's an interesting question because I actually do have a real job that I've been doing for close to 30 years. I work for a pretty large tech company and I have a large team that works for me. So that is actually my day job. That's why I spend way more time doing that than I do actually writing. So if I wasn't writing, I would probably just spend even more time doing that, maybe, or not. If it was, what would I do post this other career if I were to retire if I wasn't going to get into writing? I think I would like to get into teaching. I love to teach. I love history, so I'd love to talk to kids about history. To me, college kids would be the best because they actually get choosing to come into your class and talk about stuff. But also, any age, I like to share things about history and try to make it interesting for people.
Wonderful. We need more interesting history. Yes. Do you read your book reviews? How do you deal with bad or good ones? Now, we mentioned book reviews earlier, so I'm guessing you do read your reviews.
Yeah, I read my reviews because I think it's important to understand both positive and negative, right? Because it's almost like what I do when I have a team that I manage. I want to reinforce things that they're doing well, and I want to give them feedback on things that they need to improve on. Because the things they're doing well, I want them to do more of that. So in a positive review, I want to read through, and if someone says they like my action scenes, then I know, okay, make sure I include enough action scenes and make sure that I maintain that style that I have now. And then it's very helpful to maintaining my success. On the negative side, if somebody gives me a review, like I mentioned earlier, that is not happy with how I interpret the Bible, that's just actually, that is what it is. That's going to happen. And it's actually, to me, I don't trust, I hate to say trust, but when I look at somebody, if they have 30 or 40 reviews and they're all 4 or 5 stars, that's what I'm a little bit kind of wondering, okay, have they reached the audience yet? Because you should, if you're writing a book that for the most part, you're going to have people that don't like it. I mean, they picked it up thinking, they pick up my book thinking it was all about Roman soldiers in the Roman period. And I got a guy in modern day running around, fighting immortals. Okay, maybe they don't like it because of that. And so they give it a 2-star and they go, okay, it was misleading and blurb or whatever it is. So you should have, or they just don't like, maybe that some people don't like fast paced, right? They want to be filled in. They want an over descriptive world. I don't do that. So maybe they give me a 2 or 1 star because of that. You can learn from that, because if it's something that is very constructive that you could do differently within your style, that's great. You can incorporate it. And then you can look at some of them and go, all right, I'm never going to capture the erotica market, so I don't have to worry about that, right? If I give me a 1 star because they didn't like that I didn't have the scenes that they expected in there, that's fine with me, and that's very good. And so to me, there's a value in reading through your reviews and understanding it. The ones that are frustrating are 1 and 2 stars that have like no comments, because then I can't learn from that. Then I don't have anything to base that on. And so a 1 star with no comments is a tough one. Tough ones to take. So
yeah, that I can definitely commiserate with, because at least if they leave a comment, then whether or not this was a question of, like you were saying, something out of genre for that person. A book that's like, well, if you read exclusively historical romance novels, why would you pick up The Last Roman and not a romance? Like if you read a certain kind of book, then if you pick up something completely different, well, then maybe that wasn't necessarily written to your lens.
Yeah,
it's okay.
Exactly.
It's okay.
Yeah, and you don't know that, or they may go, hey, I found 50 typos in it, and that's why I didn't like it, right? And that's the case. Then I go, okay. I mean, I get together with my editor and I go, okay, what did we do wrong here, type of thing. Yeah. But at least getting the feedback on as to why. But I have probably a couple. I think I have 3 or 4 total 5-star or 1-star reviews, and 2 out of the 4 have no comments at all. And those are, like I said, it's just frustrating because it is what it is. It's part of the world. They just didn't like it. They hit 1 and they went on to the next book. But it would be nice to go to understand a little bit more behind that.
Yeah. And I think that's an important part about looking at criticism and looking at critique as authors. Being able to recognize that some critique is based on the quality of the work, or, I really did not believe that this person could actually make this decision when all of these things and la 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 la. Other things are just somebody being outside of their comfort zone or wanting something to go another way, or really maybe this was not the right book for them. And when we're thinking about writing a book, there's always that ideal of the ideal reader. It can, a reader that's informed in the genre and the type of story that you're telling. And especially when you're looking at something like a reader response critique and that kind of thing, you basically like a first response, a guttural response from a reader. There's that difference between an informed reader, which is basically a label for, I love cyberpunk, I write cyberpunk. So when I read cyberpunk, I am an informed cyberpunk reader. When I read something on, say, the poetry of Oceania in the 1900s, I'm so out of my league. I can try, but there's going to be so much that goes over my head. There's just going to be so much. I don't know. I don't know what I don't know. I don't know that stuff. So sometimes it's that kind of thing. And I think as long as we as authors are making sure that our work is, genre labeled correctly, that the blurb is telling, that the synopsis is going there, not just to kind of, add in the buzzwords that can get you higher up on the algorithms, but truthful to the prose.
Yeah, absolutely.
We have a better chance. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's what's tough about when you really first launch your book, you want all your family and friends to buy it. The problem with that sometimes is that if all your friends normally buy historical romance and then go buy your book, Amazon's algorithms thinks your book is a historical romance and will start recommending it to other people that read historical romance, and you may end up being in the wrong place at the wrong time, and that could very well happen, right? So it's great to get your family and stuff to support it, and you need to prime the pump, and you need to get the reviews, and you need to get all those things taken care of. It's a very critical part of launching books, especially if it's your first book, because the potential reader has no idea who you are. You got out there, you got 2 reviews, you got a book that's been out for a week or 2 weeks, you got 2 reviews, and that's it, right? So getting someone to hit the purchase button is really tough. But if it's your 5th book and they can look back and you have reviews in other books, they can kind of get some feeling there. But that's the tough part about getting family to do that and help you out there, is because, like you said, you could toss, you could be in the wrong genre and just be looking around going, yeah, I'm not historical romance, so this is not going to work out. I
don't know why I'm in this space. Yeah,
yeah, exactly. So I got to figure out how to get out of here quick. So
yeah. Do you hide any secrets in your books that only a few people will find?
Probably a little bit, and it mostly goes back to that when I was talking about that character, Sam, the psychic, my daughter. There may be sometimes when it's almost word for word a conversation that we might have had, or I would envision that we would have if we were having that in that situation. So when she reads it, she came back to me at the end of the book. She's like, Sam seems very familiar. And I was like, yeah, that's the way it is. and my brother noticed that with it as well. He pointed out that character looked a lot like my daughter. So yeah, there are some things that people that know me and close to our family would recognize, I think. So. All
right. So this is the end of the questions.
Oh, okay.
So,
very interesting ones, by the way. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks. It's the MacroMicroCosm team is a fantastic team, and they were able to source a whole slew of questions that really open up a dialogue if we want to get hip to the jive. What would you say to somebody who's looking at a legion of book spines in the bookstore? What would you say to get them to pick up yours? Sell it.
Yeah, I guess I would say if you're interested in being entertained and not get bogged down and really want an entertaining story, then that's something. My book's something you should look at. And it has a very familiar tone with it. Immortals are very popular nowadays, but it's a much different Immortal. We see immortal vampires, we see immortal witches, we see a lot of different immortals in the space, and they're all great. They all have their place. But if you're looking for something a little bit different, I don't got zombies, I don't got werewolves, I don't got vampires, I don't got witches. So I kind of have a different spot, I think, in the genre. And it's a historically accurate, and it's very fast-paced modern thriller. So it kind of hits a number of, if you're one of those cross-genre people, it hits you right in the sweet spot.
Right. So this was a wonderful conversation about The Last Roman by BK Greenwood. What if the Gladiator smashed into the Highlander and then careened into John Wick? You would get The Last Roman, Exile. I want to say a hearty thank you again to Shannon at R&R Book Tours for setting this interview up. That is rrbooktours.com. Please consider following us on social media at MacroMicroCosm on Twitter. That is MacroMicroCosm, and at MacroMicroCosm Lit Journal on Instagram. Links to our magazine are down below or at vredamedia.ca/macromicrocosm. Our current issue is Healing Hands. I hope everybody who likes speculative fiction gives it a go. And if you would like to be interviewed or know an author who would, please contact Lori on vredamedia.ca. Please consider supporting MacroMicrocosm through either the purchase of a magazine, joining our Patreon, saying hello on Twitter, anything like that. It has been absolutely fantastic to talk to BK today. I am so glad we did it. I am just digging the vibe that we've got here. The Last Roman sounds like an absolute 100% entertaining ride, and I cannot wait to get on that ride, read it, and then review it, and not just leave some form of star without words. So I'll put words, even if it's, I promised I will put words. No, I'll actually review it.
That's what I like to hear. So
yeah, maybe a few weeks from now, if not a month or two, we will actually do a full review podcast of what we thought of The Last Roman. And if you want to see BK Greenwood for yourself, please visit bkgreenwood.com and make sure you pick up your copy, either paperback, hardcover, ebook, or audiobook of The Last Roman. All right, so big support to BK, big support to The Last Roman. We had a lot of fun. I'll see you next week. I hope you had a fantastically creative day. Pascal.
Thank you very much.